So good afternoon, everyone. We just wanted to provide a quick update on the enforcement action from the street takeover event that occurred in the city of Cleveland on September 28th and 29th. So this morning at approximately 7 a.m., our street takeover task force, in collaboration with the Division of Police SWAT unit, executed a search warrant and arrest warrant outside of the city of Cleveland. The operation targeted a 25-year-old male as an active participant in the street takeover incidents that occurred on September 28th and 29th. Warrants included failure to comply, tampering with evidence, aggravated riot, disrupting public services, and possession of criminal tools. A search of his residence resulted in an impound of a vehicle believed to be used during these incidents, along with confiscation of several items related to this case. The suspect was taken into custody without incident and transported to the Cuyahoga County Jail, where he is awaiting further charges. The suspect involved, the vehicle that's involved with it that was towed today, is believed to be one of the vehicles that was recorded circling the zone car of the officers. So if you've seen the video, that's the vehicle that we were looking at, and it's also available on the city's website if anyone doesn't have access to it. And as of now, I will take any questions related to that.
Is that the Lee and Miles incident?
That's correct.
You said this arrest was taken part outside the city of Cleveland. Where was it at?
So just due to the nature of the investigation, we will release that as soon as the suspect is charged officially.
So not releasing his name right now?
That's correct.
So when we look at, obviously this is happening all over the country. We look at Columbus, where they recently just made, I think, at least nearly 200 arrests.
Mm-hmm.
Why so many arrests there, so few here?
So if you look at the operation that they conducted, it was a little bit different than what we did here. They had that information a couple weeks ahead of time. We did release. We got that the same day. So when we look at a takeover event like this, where there's a large crowd that's involved, we have to look at all our policies, and part of those policies are how we handle mass arrests, how we handle a crowd management situation. So when we look at that, those are the things we have to incorporate. At the time of the incident on September 28th to 29th, we didn't have information that this was going to occur to really properly prepare for that.
Going back, or bouncing on that question, is looking at those mass arrests in Columbus, is it time to change your strategy?
We're looking to them at what worked and what didn't work. As this, it still has to stand up in court. So they have technology we don't have, which are the spike strips. We're looking at, is that something that we will change and implement in the future? We're looking at policies related to that. What are best practices, and what is a safe way to handle these situations? Because you have to also consider some of the bystanders, and a lot of the those involved in these situations that we're looking at are between ages 15 to 20. So you're dealing with someone with who's very young, and how do you properly address that?
But it was Cleveland police that tipped off Columbus police, correct, that was happening?
That's correct.
How did you guys manage to do that, or to know it was coming? Can you share that?
So we do look at open media sources for events like this. We're always watching and monitoring for it. Unfortunately, the one that happened here, we got very late. We didn't see that one until it was almost too late. The one in Columbus, we found that on open sources and were able to connect with them and give them the information so that they could properly prepare.
And by open sources, you mean social media?
Yes.
When you talk about the task force itself, what is the demographic? Is it a team of how many people? When did you all start it, and do you all plan on keeping it for years to come?
So we started this following the event that took place here, and it's comprised of the Division of Police, State Highway Patrol, the FBI, the Sheriff's Office, the City Prosecutor, the County Prosecutor, and it's a collaboration of everyone of how to best look forward to, prosecuting those involved and also addressing anything that comes up in the future.
You were saying earlier the nature of this case, you can't release the name. What do you mean by nature of this case? Are you all still looking for suspects?
Yes. So we're actively investigating. As we talked about when we held the first initial press conference on this, we're looking at all levels of prosecution. Everything from the major crimes like we identified today to those that are, minor things for those who are just observers or, participating in, the more passive role, but they were still an active participant in these takeovers.
Was this man the driver of that car?
We're still trying to determine that, if he in fact was the driver.
Now, when we did our interview before September 28th and 29th, you said you were studying what other cities are doing.
Mhm.
What have you learned so far?
So they're all unique. You have to look at, one of the things we look at with these events that are taking over on public streets and private properties. So there's a big difference there. You have to have, when it's on a private property, you have to have the property owner on board for the prosecution. So we have to make sure that they're an active participant in how we address these situations. So if you look at these bigger lots like Lee Harvard or Roses over off at 65th, we have to have those property owners on board because they're part of the victims and they have to have a part in the prosecution. So that the takeover on city streets is a little bit easier for us to address and to hold those accountable, but when you have, the private properties, it's a little bit different. And I know that Columbus, I believe, had the property owners on board for that.
At the end of the day, who is this really affecting? These street takeovers, who is it hurting the most when you see these actions happen on social media?
So, well, it affects everyone because it gets this big gathering and, it's encouraged activity and it's dangerous activity and it could affect somebody who's just driving down the street, someone who's walking in the area that's unaware, that they're coming to, spin tires or light fires or whatever they're doing out there. But what we see here are, a little bit distinctive. Some of these are happening in areas that are, not residential areas, and, a lot of people don't even know that they're going on. For the past several weekends, we've had details of officers out there every weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday night, and they're going out and addressing these smaller groups because they still continue to gather. The activity doesn't stop. It doesn't, we still have the local kids that are out here and they're gathering in their vehicles and they're still, showing off in their cars. So they're still out there doing these things, just not on that large scale where they're affecting the entire community. But we're still actively going out there every weekend, writing citations, towing vehicles since this original incident occurred.
But our officers, in a larger sense, feel as if they're handcuffed by the consent decree. Had we not been under federal monitoring, would the response on that weekend have been different?
So if you look at the majority of our officers, they all started under the consent decree. So, to be handcuffed by it, I wouldn't say that that's an accurate depiction because they're just trained on a policy, so that the policies we have come from the consent decree, but our policies are very clear on what their actions are. And, when we write these policies, we consider public safety. When we have these, when you talk about pursuits, we have to look at community safety when we're going to actively engage in a pursuit because you see too many end tragically.
So there's no fear that they might get in trouble if they respond in a certain way, try to be more aggressive?
Well, it's not really being aggressive. They just have to follow the policies. And we have bosses out there when we're having these details on the weekends. We not only have our, frontline officers out there, we have a supervisor, but we also have a member of the command staff who's out there to make sure that they understand what they can and can't do and that they have clear directions.
Regardless of these arrests, we're still going to see people out there who just don't take this seriously, who are still going to go out and try to do these things. What is your message to the people who aren't taking this seriously, these arrests? What would you say to them?
So I just want anyone who knows or who was involved in this to know that the investigation's not over. So we're still actively, we have a lot of people that are identified and we're looking at what those charges are. So if you actively participated, you may have a knock on your door at one point. and you're going to be held accountable to those actions. But you have to realize the bigger picture, and I know it's hard for younger people to realize it. You're putting yourself in a lot of danger. You're putting others. It could be your mother who is going to the store. It could be, your child. It could be anyone you're putting in danger with these activities. It's very unsafe when you're taking, a vehicle that's several thousand pounds and you don't know what it's capable of. And is a tire going to blow? Is something going to happen that this car is going to go out of control and hit and potentially kill somebody?
How many people, if you had to ballpark it, are you all still looking for? I know you don't have an exact number, but maybe 25, 30?
I don't know if we have that number at this point. I can tell you that if you saw that when we put the information out to contact us with any information related to it, we had put out our email address. I can tell you we received hundreds of tips. The community is angry, and the community is very active about talking about, I saw that vehicle, I know where that vehicle is, I've seen that person, I know who drives that car. We've had very active tips from the community because they don't want this in their neighborhoods.
How many of those from the pictures that were released, I understand there were substantial tips from that, have panned out, have led to persons of interest?
I can tell you that probably the majority of the pictures we released, we've got some type of information from. It was very helpful.
One last question. Good?
We're good?
Good?
Thank you.
Thank you.